Delighted to have Secretary Brian Moran on This Week in Virginia. Brian is the Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security, and it's going on 7 years in that position, appointed by Governor McAuliffe and then reappointed by Governor Northam. Member of the House of Delegates back in the 1990s up until the time that you became a member of the cabinet. Brian, we're going to put your website up because people can get a great deal of information. And I like one of the themes that comes up immediately, and that's building a safer, more resilient Virginia. And I was thinking that's somewhat the theme of what I'm going to be asking you to talk about today, a safer and more resilient Virginia. We have legislatures finished the special session, and I'd like for you to start just talking with us some about the matters that were covered in that special session, and then perhaps it may even be matters not covered that you see coming up in the next session.
Well, David, thanks for having me on. And yes, there's a lot to discuss. Let me just first, here it is on Thursday, and it is pouring rain, and I'm wearing my emergency manager's shirt today because I just want to give a shout out, really to all the first responders. One of the wonderful aspects of my job, I get to work with the first responder community of Virginia, whether it's firefighters and EMTs, our state police, our local emergency managers. While we're all at home safely and dry, enjoying the comforts of our home, or in my office, and I see you're in your office, they're out. They're out monitoring the rivers and streams for flooding today, and I've received a lot of emails and a lot of traffic with respect to the heavy rains, and so I just want to give them a big shout out and appreciate what they do to ensure the safety of all of our citizens. So now with respect to the special session, it was really the entire year of 2020 has been historic. Not all good. Certainly COVID and the deaths that have resulted from the coronavirus are very tragic. We're up well over 3,600 deaths, today that we're speaking. And so it's been a rough year. Now, legislatively, it has been a tremendously busy year. You had just last session, big session, new Democratic majorities, and so they flexed their muscles and got a lot of legislation passed, certainly around gun violence efforts. That generated a lobby day of January 20th, the big lobby day of Second Amendment supporters. So that was a big event in emergency management and Homeland Security work. And then throughout that session, a lot of legislation got passed. And then this summer, you had COVID, but then you had the death of George Floyd up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. That got the attention of legislators all across the country, and certainly here in the Commonwealth. And so when the governor called for a special session to resolve some of the budget issues that were created by COVID-19, obviously the restaurant industries, a number of hospitality industries were really dramatically, significantly impacted and lost of revenue. So we wanted to come back to the budget table and recompose the budget. So we called a special session, and then in the midst of that, because of the George Floyd case and the protests that were going on around police reform, they reassembled in August and tackled a lot of issues. And so it has indeed been a very busy year. They just concluded the special session, which ran approximately the same amount of time as a regular session. Usually special sessions are in a matter of days, not weeks. And here we had a 2-month regular session. So that's kind of the structure or the scenario in which we were dealing with. And so the legislature passed a number of bills around police reform and criminal justice reform. So let me just speak quickly, or I'll start out with the police reform. bills. The governor at the beginning of the session, we gave him a package of bills from our agencies that we thought would be good reforms. Department of Criminal Justice Services is one of our agencies in public safety, and they felt that uniform training. We have 36 academies around the Commonwealth who train our police, and so we thought, each academy should have a curriculum that is similar and uniform. So that was one aspect. Another one was the duty to intervene. You saw that out in Minnesota, where other officers did not intervene in that case, and so that was legislation we thought we could promote. And then working with our state police, we had some other ideas with respect to training and duty to intervene, and I'm forgetting one. It'll come to me, but we had about 4 or 5 different pieces around police reforms. Oh, information sharing. Yeah, I'm sorry. When you're hiring police from other agencies, it's important to know what their backgrounds were, and up to now there was really no duty for that information to be shared, and we actually proposed, requiring that information to be shared. And that's something the police chiefs, the governor and I met with the police chief shortly, after the George Floyd incident, to get their perspective on what should be done here in Virginia. And that was one of their issues. That said, we really would appreciate more information being shared about hires and why were they terminated, and make it easier to terminate those who are indeed bad actors. And so, but first, let me just, the vast majority of law enforcement here in the Commonwealth are doing a terrific job. I think any polling that we've done, VCU has done polling around police, and the vast majority of Virginians believe our police are professional and they do a good job. And certainly that is my opinion as well. And so these reforms really were in response to those incidents where there's bad actions, but that's an aberration as opposed to the typical behavior of our law enforcement officers. And so, those are the governor's ideas. All of those passed. All of those bills were incorporated into other bills or pursued, and we ended up getting them signed. So I think with respect to those bills, it was a very successful session.
I was going to go back to that one bill, but you said it did pass, because it's interesting on that sharing of information part. To someone not in law enforcement, but in the area that I work in, that seems such a logical thing that would happen. But it's like it came as a result of some tragedies that occurred in the country that really there was the impetus for all the parties to come together and to get that accomplished. And I think that's, while you said again, if it's a tiny percent of 1%, the police chiefs want to know, and the ones that are doing the hiring and the human resources, they want to know, so they make sure they're not hiring someone who really was fired from another department.
Well, in Virginia, they have to go through a weeks-long academy. I mean, we visited the state police this week, and they have 2 academies going on right now. I mean, it's months-long academy, and it's residential. It's really challenging. They gotta commit. Those cadets go and they stay at the Virginia State Police barracks. They get trained. It's 24/7. They miss their families. I mean, it's a rigorous program. And so when they get out, we're really proud of them. They're ready to roll. And so I'm confident they're doing a good job. I just, but then what happens, David? Somebody, okay, now that they're trained, they're a certified law enforcement officer. You have to be a certified law enforcement officer. You have to go through the academies here in Virginia. Well, and then you're very marketable. Some other agency who pays more money, well, okay, you're certified. State police, Virginia taxpayers have paid for their academy, but now I'm going to offer you significant more money and take you away. I mean, that is unfortunately something that happens in some of the more wealthier communities here in Virginia. They can afford it, or even out of state. We hear Texas Rangers pay significantly more money than the Virginia State Police do. So, a matter of compensation is always a challenge, in making sure our law enforcement are receiving appropriate compensation, a dangerous job. And so, so there is a lot of transfers from one jurisdiction to another. We want to make sure those transfers are for, either family reasons or, promotional opportunities, not because you are, some sort of a bad actor or exhibited bad behavior, and a new agency, a new law enforcement agency hires you without knowing that, because that just perpetuates those problems. And so that was, I think, very important change to make sure that information is indeed transferred. No, and something else with respect to that in terms of the hiring, there's a psychological evaluation now required. So our state police have done psychological evaluations already, but not all law enforcement do that. And that is now a requirement that, a psychological evaluation be made available because it's a tough job. And, a very special individual has to get hired to do that job. It's a challenging job, and you're presented a number of, what could be very dangerous situations. And so, overall, I think those pieces, that'll help, it'll help give. And what really has to happen, David, is the community has to have trust in our law enforcement. What we saw with the protests this year is there are a lot of community members that do not have trust in our law enforcement. And so I think these measures will go a long way in doing that. And so, we want to build that trust. So it's a two-way street. We rely on our community to observe the law and behave, and same with our law enforcement officers.
I jumped right in without talking about the fact that you had 10 agencies under you. I was going over the 10, and 5 of them were really key and involved in issues that came up in the special session. If we move over to one in particular, because even in the governor's recent news conference that he called you up to talk some about what was happening with regards to COVID in corrections. On the day that we're talking, Washington Post and other news media are talking about that real concern nationwide about outbreaks in prisons. I mean, it was nursing homes early on, and now it seems like prisons have gotten a lot of the attention. I know you spoke to this a couple of days ago, but what else could you tell us about?
That seems to come up every press conference, so I'm always ready with my
right.
I'm always ready with my numbers. Unfortunately, I got my numbers that day, and we have about 30,000 inmates serving sentences in Virginia prisons. We have about 41 facilities. So when this COVID outbreak occurred in March, we were on the phone and met with Harold Clark, the director of corrections, immediately, because we were learning almost at the very onset of this. It was at a long-term care facility out in Seattle, Washington, where in Kings County, as I recall, and so we knew, all right, long-term care facilities, any congregate housing. Well, obviously prisons everybody's, they're bunked up. They're, they're not free to leave. And so we needed to have special attention to them. And so we worked ever since then with Department of Corrections to respond. And we shut off we shut off visits. You can do video visitation now, but family and others, friends, no physical visitations. They're not visiting any of our facilities. Then we stopped accepting inmates from jails. In Virginia, you go to court, you're in the local jail, you get sentenced. Well, you leave the local jail to a prison. We stopped transfers because, again, any movement of people, you would spread the disease. And so that was stopped. And then we came up with this whole new idea called Inmate Early Release Program, because we don't have parole in Virginia. There was no way for us to get anyone out. And so we said, well, who might be deserving of an early release? And so we said, so we came up with this idea, anyone serving with 1 year less, one year less on their sentence. So you're getting out in the next 12 months, have the DOC review those cases if they have a home health plan, so they have someplace to go, because everything was disrupted. They no longer had, their housing. They no longer had substance abuse counseling back home. Everything was disrupted. But if they have a home health plan and they in a recipe for success, if they were to be released, then DOC could release them. So that was a whole new plan. We gave it to the legislature. They passed that, and then we worked with our Department of Health to make sure we did as much testing as possible, because you got to know if there's a positive case and they're asymptomatic, people may not even know it. They could be spreading it without knowing it. And so we did as much testing as possible. And yeah, as of Tuesday, we were at the press conference. We've conducted 47,804 tests. So that means with a population of 30,000, some inmates have been tested more than once. And so we're doing as much testing as possible. We go in with the help of the National Guard and VDH. We go in, we test everyone at these facilities, plus the correctional officers. And then if we find out if there's a positive test, then we can isolate them. And so we've been very, very aggressive. And it goes up and down in terms of positive cases. There's some positive cases at Coffeywood now. There were positive cases at Buckingham. And then, you quarantine folks, and then the numbers come down. You see that in the general population, how the numbers go up and then they go down. So, right now we have 240 offenders. This was as of Tuesday, positive in our facilities. We haven't had a death since October 2nd. Ultimately, that's what you're concerned with, the death rate. We've had 33 deaths since March, but we haven't had one since October 2nd, so over a month now. And so DOC is doing the very best they can. It's a real challenge, any congregate housing. I will tell you, the prisons are going to be high on the list. I'm insisting on it. When we do get a vaccine, we got to hit the long-term care facilities, got to obviously hit our healthcare workers, but those are the most vulnerable. And our prisons, they're very vulnerable populations. And so we want them to be up on that list to make sure we can address those. And I know a lot of family and relatives are concerned when there's an outbreak. I get it. We get it, but DOC is doing the very best they can with respect to responding to the COVID crisis. Long answer, David, but we've done a lot of work with DOC. Oh, and DJJ, David, I got a letter, Department of Juvenile Justice. We had the facility. We had about 200 kids. I got a letter from a bunch of prosecutors saying, "Oh, release everybody." These prosecutors sent them there, and then they turn around and say, "Release everybody." Well, that's nice, but how do we release them? How do we get them before a judge? Are you willing to join us in releasing them? And so, and then we got a bunch of letters from legislators, all about Bon Air and juveniles. And so we work diligently with it. And and at the press conferences, I had to respond a lot to the juvenile justice questions. I haven't gotten a question since in about 4 months. You know why? Because we've gotten it under control. We haven't had a positive case. We've had no deaths. But we haven't even had a positive case since July. And this is here in November. So nobody asked, the media never asked about the good things. Right. They only asked about the negative. Right now, we have a great story to tell at juvenile at Bon Air. Valerie Boyk and her team and the whole DJJ employees are doing a great job. We haven't had a case since July.
But before we would end our conversation today, what about money from the CARES Act? Are you scattered throughout your 10 agencies, the 5 that we might refer to: juvenile justice, parole board, corrections, criminal justice, state police? Those are at the top. But are there funds that have been allocated by the governor or here recently by the General Assembly that's providing some help that's needed, maybe in PPE or whatever?
Yeah, everybody's wearing a mask. This is a heavy duty one, but the variety of masks and hand sanitizer. Really, the agency that has been really working on the whole COVID response has been the Virginia Department of Emergency Management. Curtis Brown and his team, they've been doing a stellar job. they have been, they're the ones that initially got into all of the contracts for PPE. A lot of foreign contracts. Unfortunately, all that material has been received, and we were really excited when it did come in, because we were hearing a lot of horror stories about supply chain problems and it either being hijacked or being withheld for ransom. And so we got the PPE, and we were thrilled. So VDIM's been doing a great job. So we do, we want to get PPE to our schools. We want to get them to our healthcare workers. We want to get them to our essential workers, home healthcare. We worked with Medicaid Services to get a big shipment to our home healthcare nursing aides that are going home, because a lot of elderly are not going to nursing homes right now because it's congregate housing. So they're choosing to stay at home. They can't stay at home without a home health aide nurse. And so we got them PPE. And so, yes, a lot of efforts with respect to CARES Act money. We're grateful. It all has to be spent by December 30th. So I know Congress is trying to work up a new CARES, a new stimulus effort. But we have used that CARES Act. We gave a lot. The governor chose to give a lot of it to local communities to let them decide how it was going to be spent. It's been spent for housing and rent assistance, and it's been a number of things in a variety of things that it has been spent on. But from our perspective, we want to make sure our first responders have PPE, our jails, our correctional officers have PPE, our inmates have the necessary face shields and facial masks. So that has been a big expenditure, big issue, David.
Secretary Moran, we really appreciate your being on This Week in Virginia. You were one of our best guests that we had over the years on This Week in Richmond. We're glad you're on. And I always like to give you the final word. And as I've looked back, you've always had some good final words. So now I've got the pressure put on you. So what's the last word you would have for our viewers today?
Well, I guess, we're all frustrated. We're all, it's November, and this COVID cloud has been hanging over us for weeks and now months. And I know everyone is getting frustrated, and the colder months are arriving. So I would just ask everyone to have patience and persevere. I mean, we got to get through this. We do see the light at the end of the tunnel. There's a big announcement this week about a vaccine. We're probably looking at the end of the year or January of next. That's really only several weeks away. We get through the holidays. Be careful around Thanksgiving. I mean, social distance. I know that's challenging. We're probably going to be all indoors, but avoid large crowds. Wear your mask. We got to get through the next couple of months. Big holiday months. We get through them. There's clearly light at the end of the tunnel. So, final words is everybody just have patience. We're almost there. We're almost at the finish line. It's been a terrible year. I mean, it's been rough, but we're almost there. And so let's get through it. We'll get on the other side of the tunnel here, and we'll have a great 2021. I'm really looking forward to it. And so here's to a great 2021.
Thank you very much. Look forward to talking with you again.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Guys.